Hey guys, it's ExandShadow here with an impressions video for you guys. Now, if you know me, you know that I love the fuck out of Ace Attorney. I mean, Ace Attorney is probably my favorite video game franchise of all time, period. I know that might sound a little bit weird because I talk a whole lot more about stuff like Paper Mario or Pikmin or Banjo or stuff like that, but that's mostly just due to the circumstances about the franchise. Talking about Ace Attorney is very, very hard because, for one, if you're talking about Ace Attorney to someone who's never played the games, you really got to be vague so you don't spoil the plot because the plot is the most important thing about it. And even when you're talking about it with someone else, it's a story-based game, so there's not a whole lot more. There aren't as many instances where I find that it's applicable to talk about it. But rest assured, I do really love Ace Attorney, and so I was really looking forward to Dual Destinies coming out, which I just beat a couple of hours ago. I sort of slept on my thoughts, and I'm ready to sort of give them out to you. So now, I'm going to give a very short spoiler free portion of this because this is a plot-based game, and if I'm going to talk about what I'm feeling, I'm going to have to talk about the plot. So if you don't want any spoilers, here's my recommendations. If you are already an Ace Attorney fan, buy and play this game. If you've already played through all the games before it, buy and play it. It's worth your time. It's worth your money. Go get it. It's good. If you are not an Ace Attorney fan, however, go and find the first game, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, and play through that. If you like that, go play Justice for All, which is the second game, and then Trials and Tribulations, and then Apollo Justice, and then Investigations, and then come back and play this. This series it's very important to play through the games in order of release because that's really the best way to understand the flow of the story. Even if the games aren't necessarily released in chronological order, you're going to want to play through them in order of release because that's the order where they were written in. Of course, that means it's going to be the order in which you understand the writing the best. So, newbies don't get it. Veterans, go ahead and get it. Okay, so spoiler-free part of this review is over. Why don't we just go on into spoilers? So what did I think about the game overall? Well, I liked it, but it definitely had its problems, and I'll start off with the technical ones to begin with because there are a few. The biggest technical issue that I have, typos. There are a lot of typos in this game, and I don't mean like, just one here or one there, There were scattered typos in the previous games, but I never really remember more than one or two in any of the previous Ace Attorney games. Even the most famous one being JFA's The Miracle Never Happened. That one was really the only typo I can remember happening in that entire game. So, the thing is that in Dual Destinies, I found like six typos by the end of the second case and like 10 by the end of the fourth. It's just there are typos all over the place in this, and this is a game about storytelling, and obviously, you're gonna want to proofread this shit. If this many typos were found in like a print book that went out to Barnes and Nobles and on Kindles and iPads and shit like that, that would be unacceptable. And it's just odd seeing this many typos in an Ace Attorney game because if there's one thing that these games have done consistently well ever since they came out, on the DS is that the localization and translation has been amazing. And the localization is still good here, but the actual translation part where, they get stuff like grammar and writing right, not saying extremely importantly or don't without the T or shit like that. It's all over the place, and it's not anything that could really take away from your enjoyment of the game because it's not like you can't understand what's going on through the typos, but it's one of those things where it looks lazy when you see any typo in in a game. So having this many in a game that's all about the writing is just ugh. It's something that should have been cleaned up, I say. Other technical things. The animations in this game are amazing. This is probably the best looking 3DS game I have played ever. You know, um, The animations on all the characters are really, really smooth. The models are really well detailed. They have this really cool effect where an outline will appear over parts of the character whenever like parts of the body cross over each other, which happens a lot because Ace Attorney. But the models are detailed and fluid and really, really nice. This is easily the best looking Ace Attorney game, and probably the best looking 3DS game I've played overall. It looks awesome. Music is also really, really nice. I wouldn't say it's my favorite soundtrack in the series because, I like Ace Attorney Investigations' music better. I like the first game's music better. There are scattered tracks in Trials and Tribulations that I like better. But Dual Destinies, as per series standard, does have an amazing soundtrack, with my favorite track probably being Athena's Objection theme. That's been stuck in my head all weekend, and I just love the fuck out of that track. So yeah, music great as per usual. Also, I need to give props to this soundtrack because in Apollo Justice, I really could not stand Apollo's theme, but the remixes in Dual Destinies have really gotten me to start liking it. Though I don't know why that just suddenly started happening. Maybe it's just because it's been a few years since I played Apollo Justice, or maybe it's just because it's not as obnoxiously overplayed as in Apollo Justice, or maybe it's just that nice piano jazzy piece remix that they have during the investigation stages that got me to like it so much. But either way, Apollo's theme is now pretty damn good in my opinion. So yeah, it's interesting how your thoughts on stuff like that can change over time. But yeah, graphics are great, music's great. The characterization is also great. One of my biggest problems with Apollo Justice, the game, was that Apollo's character did not seem very distinct from Phoenix. He just seemed like sort of a much less experienced Phoenix Wright from the first three games. And in turn, Phoenix became incredibly sarcastic and assholish, which sort of went against some of what his character was like in the original trilogy. I mean, I understand the evolution because, he's not a lawyer anymore. He doesn't have to hold back what he's thinking. But it came across as more dickish than I thought it should be for Phoenix. And also, Trucy really didn't have all that much unique going on as well. She really just seemed like another Maya that just happened to have a magician fetish. Ace Attorney Dual Destinies does a really great job of making all the characters seem unique and distinct again, which I really, really like. Phoenix is back to his original Ace Attorney 1 through 3 sort of mindset, where he's pretty polite and formal when he's speaking, but he's also got that inner running sarcastic monologue that I love. Trucy has been given more of a background role, so while her personality isn't really changed all that much, she doesn't really say a whole lot anyway, so it doesn't really bother me as much. Um, Apollo has finally been given a personality that's distinct from Phoenix. So where Phoenix is sort of the veteran who can just sort of snark everything off, at least in his mind, Apollo is very much like Charlie Brown, where he's like, "Ugh, why did it have to be me?" Ugh. And he's just sort of the put upon newbie who everybody makes fun of. So I really like that they managed to give Apollo his own distinct personality, which I think is about damn time too. He also finally gets some fucking character development, which is way too late. His entire game, he basically had no character development, and he gets more character development in one single conversation in Case 4 than he did in everything in Apollo Justice. So, yeah, finally he's starting to become an interesting character, which I appreciate. Then we've got newbie Athena Sykes, who is one of my new favorite Ace Attorney characters, and I really like her quite a bit. She doesn't feel like Maya again. She's again peppy and energetic, but she's also energetic in a different sort of way. Because while Maya was just sort of like always happy all the time, super peppy fun times, Athena bounces around from emotion to emotion and basically has no filter. Like when she's angry, she'll just start yelling at people and then instantly switch to being like cheerful and doing jumping jacks or whatever. So Athena definitely does have her own separate personality that really meshes in with the group very well. Her conversations with Apollo really do show off their friendship, and the two of them have an amazing chemistry. And this especially comes through during the third case, where instead of the sort of down to earth the main defense lawyer, and the peppy assistant. The peppy assistant is actually the main defense lawyer, and the down to earth one is the support role. I really like that sort of switch because it actually makes more sense in that way to have the more level-headed one being in the support role. I really liked that. The returning characters all sort of stay true to form. Edgeworth is Edgeworthy, Pearl is Pearl E. The judge is just as Judge E as ever. My only issue with the returning characters is that they seem a little bit forced, if that makes any sense. Like Clavier in Case 3 didn't really need to be there. Pearl and Edgeworth were really only put there for nostalgia's sake, although I don't mind seeing them because at least they acknowledge their existence. If there's one thing that bugged me about Apollo is that we never really got all that much closure on what happened to all these other characters, because the Ace Attorney series has a gigantic cast of characters. We never found out what happened to Gumshoe. We never found out what happened to Pearl. We never found out what happened to Francesca or to Edgeworth. Really, the only things that we knew for sure was that Maya and Nick still kept in touch because she sent him Steel Samurai DVDs, and there was one implied reference to Old Bag when you examined stuff. So it's nice to see more references to the universe at large, but I still can't deny that they are relying on nostalgia at some point, which inherently rubs me the wrong way. And now the mechanics for Dual Destinies have changed a little bit. It's still the same sort of read-tastic contradiction spotting sort of stuff, but the investigation sequences have been remarkably streamlined, for better and for worse. Now, whenever you want to move somewhere, you can just choose all of the locations off of a list, which I actually think is a major improvement because, especially once the environments started getting big in the previous games, you know, it was easy to forget where to go because you couldn't just go from the office to the crime scene. You had to go from the office to the entrance to the building to the second floor to the crime scene or something like that. It was never as clear cut as it needed to be. So I really like that change. Another thing that I like is that they added a little notebook that you could check in your court record during investigation scenes, and basically that just allowed you to check what you needed to do. So it says, talk to the witness, examine this room, present new evidence to the detective, stuff like that. You'll never forget what you're supposed to do, which I actually like a lot because I can't tell you how many times in previous games that I loaded up an investigation file and I had no idea what I was doing. So yeah, I really appreciate that. However, the streamlining comes at a price where the investigation segments really drag you through them a whole lot more than in the previous games. Now, Ace Attorney has always been linear, it's always been a straight shot, there's only one way through sort of game, and I like it that way because, you can't have storytelling this polished with the sort of open-endedness that comes with a Skyrim-esque, non-linearity. It has to be told in a specific way in order for things to make sense, and I don't mind that. The problem is that the investigations in the previous games didn't feel like you were being dragged along as much as they did in Dual Destinies. In Dual Destinies, you'll open up in the office and you'll talk to the person you'll talk to like Athena and Apollo in the office, etc., etc. The trial was bad, the trial was good, and then you'll go to the detention center. You don't move to the detention center. You are taken to the detention center without being moved. And then you talk to the client, and there's nothing that you really ever need to present to them. You just sort of go through the dialogue list. And then you go to the crime scene, and you're not choosing to go through the crime scene. You are taken, the screen fades to black, and then fades back up at the crime scene. And then at the crime scene, and only the crime scene, you get the ability to examine the place. And that's actually one of the biggest disappointments about the game, is that you are no longer allowed to examine every single room that you go into, which is a major shame because if you play the Ace Attorney games, there's tons of hidden dialogue you can find if you examine stuff that really doesn't mean anything, like in Phoenix's office examining the plant, you find out that the plant is named Charlie, and they keep on talking about Charlie throughout the entire series. Or you find a ladder in some place and you examine it, and then Phoenix and Maya will always argue about whether it's called a ladder or a step ladder. Although they do somewhat reference that running gag in the main dialogue, so at least they do that. But being able to examine everything was part of the charm of Ace Attorney, even if it's not really necessary most of the time, there was tons of great dialogue there. So it's really a shame that they sort of missed it. That. But the examinations themselves, the 3D examinations, I do like some of the changes they added to them. Like, first off, when you move the cursor around the screen, it'll sort of like flash when you're examining something new, and it'll have a check mark whenever you're over something you've already examined. So, it's very hard to get lost in the examination segments. Although, again, that sort of adds to the fact that the investigation parts are just sort of dragging you along. You can't get through until you examine every single piece of individual stuff in each investigation room. Which means that, even if it's just an item that doesn't matter and it's just a joke item, you still have to examine that, which is dumb. Also, I miss the examination style from Ace Attorney investigations, because actually being able to walk around the room and examine stuff that way, I thought was really cool. And if there's one thing that investigations did do well, it's that the investigation segments were the best in the series. So I really wish that they had modeled this off of that. But you know what? Whatever. I can deal. But yeah, the investigation segments, that's really my biggest issue with them, It's just that you don't really have any choice in what you get to do. Because even if you did have to do everything in the end, in the previous games you could always choose whether you wanted to talk to Witness A or Witness B first. So, that's my biggest issue with that. When it comes to the cases themselves, my biggest issue with them is that this is a writing problem that has been happening since Apollo Justice, is that the writers have been way too focused on the how of the cases rather than the why. Basically, they come up with these case ideas with we're going to come up with this extremely convoluted way that the body got from point A to point B, and then that's the player finding out how that happened is going to be the main puzzle of the case. And I don't like that writing style very much, because in the first 3 games, as ridiculous as they got with cross-examining parrots and cross-examinations and spirit mediums and masks with coffee cups and stuff like that, the actions of the people in the cases always seemed relatively grounded by the fact that the characters' emotions and thoughts and situations came first, and coming up with a ridiculous moving the body or how the person got murdered scheme came second. Whenever you're writing a story like this, like a murder mystery, the first thing you really need to think of is, why did this victim get killed, and why did the murderer kill them? That's basically the most important part of a murder mystery, In the end, the how isn't as interesting as the why. I don't give a fuck how the murderer ended up with 20 stab wounds when the blade didn't have blood on it, or how the victim ended up 2 floors below when it was killed on the 4th floor. It's that stuff is nice just so that we have something a little bit more substantial than just motive to work with. But motive is the most important part of a murder investigation. It's the most interesting thing from a viewer's perspective to investigate. And this time around, especially, there's no motive for any of the bad guys in this game. Case 1, Ted Tonate, his motive was greed. He killed the victim so that his bribery scheme doesn't get found out. Case 2, the motive is greed. The bad guy wanted to steal some gold out of this thing, which resulted in the most ridiculously convoluted and stupid murder plans that I've ever seen in anything. Case 3, the motive was greed. He was taking bribes and the victim found out about it. Case 4 doesn't really even have a motive because it's just a prelude to Case 5, where the bad guy there is just a spy getting paid to do what he does, so the motive was greed. All of the bad guys have the same fucking motive. It's ridiculous. And it's not like every bad guy needs to be sympathetic. Not everybody needs to be Godo or Acro or Yogi. Not every bad guy needs to have a super deep, sensitive reason for why they did it. Especially for like the first case or so. You can have your first guy be greed because you need to just explain the mechanics, and you can have your second guy, it's just. But every single one having the same fucking motive, that's just dumb. And you don't even ever really need to figure out motive in this game, which is just really frustrating because you're too busy figuring out how bodies got moved and how people got in and out of forbidden chambers and how the writing in the cases is so ridiculously convoluted. It's just frustrating. It's just you shouldn't write a case like I know Ace Attorney is all about its style and its ridiculousness, but you shouldn't write a game you shouldn't write stories like this where you come up with a ridiculously convoluted explanation first and then you fill in the plot details later. No, that's not good writing. That is not good writing. That is basically my biggest issue with the game is that it's still got that ridiculously convoluted writing style that Apollo Justice and Ace Attorney Investigations had. With that said, I still enjoyed playing through the game. I think it's better than okay, I'm not exactly sure if it's better than Investigations. It's definitely better than Apollo, because Apollo had a bunch of things that just pissed me the fuck off. But I'd say it's on the same level as Investigations. So, not as good as the original trilogy, I'd think. But it's still worth your time, especially if you're an Ace Attorney fan. It's just that with Capcom giving Ace Attorney fans the shaft for the past couple of years, it was like, 3 years in between Apollo and Investigations, and we still haven't gotten Ace Attorney Investigations 2, which I hear is, from the people who have played it, I hear is much better. And there was just this giant scare over whether Dual Destinies would even come out over here, and even then it's just a downloadable release. We don't get a physical version. Ace Attorney fans, like many other Capcom fans of Capcom franchises, have been sort of kicked in the gut a lot these past couple of years. So, finally getting this game was such a victory, and in the end, it's a disappointment in that sense where, all of the waiting, all of the whining, all of the anticipation sort of results in just another subpar Ace Attorney game. And again, a subpar Ace Attorney game does still have some amazing writing, some amazing characterization, I should say, some amazing, character bits, some fantastic music, laugh out loud, funny jokes, great animation, it's still worth your time. It's just, it doesn't come close to anything that happened in the first 3 games, which is a disappointment, I might say. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on Ace Attorney Dual Destinies. This is really just a couple of hours after I beat the game, so, maybe time will change these opinions, but for now, that's really just what I think. So, thank you all for listening. I'm ExandShadow, and I'll see you guys later.